Hey, look, you mind not breathing all over me, man? I'm trying to work here.
Okay, so now go to www.
Kid never heard of mouthwash. Is this the website?
No, you typed it wrong. There are two S's.
Hey now, don't look at this. This isn't for children to see. Who is this little? Stupid computer froze up. Hang on, I'll reboot. This is probably gonna take a
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. You stupid monkey.
You are a fucking hillbilly! You are a hillbilly! I am a god! You live in a penthouse! You are a fucking hillbilly! You live on a farm!
That's the opposite of what I was saying. That's the good thing.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on!
Hey guys. Ooh, hey, now it's on. It's on. Is it on? It's tracking. The green light's on. Does that mean it's on? Yeah, it's on. Hey, welcome back to Soccermom's podcast again. These last few episodes been kind of free-form, retroscript, kind of off-the-cuff kind of stuff. I've started doing less of an outline and more of a, let's just read what's in the news today, you know, and it lowers the quality, and I'm not a big fan of it right now. I want to keep the conversationalist style. I like going that direction. It makes it really comfortable to listen to. I mean, at least in my ears, I still hate hearing my voice on playback sometimes. It's just disgusting.
We've done a lot of things we're not proud of. Robbing graves, plundering the tombs, double parking. But nobody got hurt. Well, maybe somebody got hurt, but nobody we knew.
But I wanted to do this episode a little differently. We're going to start a series now. I got this book that I've been reading, and I'm close to the end of it. And what I've been doing is I've been researching more dinosaurs again. Back on after that episode, it was 2 or 3 or whatever, when I talked about Spinosaurus, I got a lot of good feedback. And I mean, honestly, it was such a fun time researching dinosaurs because that's something I've always enjoyed. It's something that's been near and dear to me for a long time, and I want to gather information, share about it, because there's so many crazy things I didn't even know about still, alone from the dinosaurs. Even like the paleontologists themselves are some wacky dudes, and the stories of finding these bones, like, again, it's just pure luck sometimes when you discover a dinosaur. Right now there's a lot of new revolutionary science going on, like the reconstructions of more accurate fossils, and like you've got a T-Rex now that has lips and stuff like that. Like, it's bounds in evolutionary science when it comes to dinosaurs. And right now I want to take us back in this episode to the beginning, back when there was no such thing as dinosaurs. Take us back 200 and plus some years ago, back in the 1700s, when they were finding all these fossils and they thought they were the fossils of giants. For example, in 1726, Johann Schwesnier, and forgive me for any French or German or any kind of pronunciations of any kind of names that we come up with, these ancient paleontologists. Again, I'm not very good at book reading. So.
Oh, no. Yeah!
Johann discovered a giant extinct salamander, the skeleton, the fossilized remains of it, but described it as Homo divuli testis, which is, quote-unquote, Latin translating for a man who was witness of the flood, because of his bias towards the Bible. And anything that was before their time was considered Genesis, Book of Genesis shit. When really, if you look at the fossil, it looks nothing like a human skeleton at all. It is very similar to the Japanese giant salamanders, nearly identical. Georges Cuvier came back and actually published this, talking about that. And I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's a lizard and that it's not some kind of human, but at the time, you know, this is 220 some years ago. This is back when people we didn't have this advanced kind of science in our hands. We didn't have this notion of comparative biology. We didn't have, Darwin didn't come into the picture until 1859. Yeah, it was when he published The Origin of Species. And before then, hundreds of years, people have been finding bones and just thinking that, oh, these gotta be giants. They gotta be giants.
Well, do go on, please.
Weird shit like that. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into this thing on Megalosaurus, because the first scientific name for Megalosaurus was actually described as Scrotum humanum, and I think I think it says it all right there. Yeah! You guys ever seen the YouTube video where they put Seth Rogen's laugh over pod racing? It's gold. It's pure gold. Again, I should talk about the book. It's pretty great. I'm getting a lot of my facts from the story of dinosaurs and 25 discoveries. Sounds like one of those BuzzFeed articles put into a book, right? It's not. It's not. It's actually really good. And the guy, Donald R. Prothero, he's an actual American geologist, paleontologist, and author who specializes in mammalian paleontology and magnetostratigraphy. Magnetostratigraphy. I could never get that. It's got like 5 syllables. Magnetostratigraphy, which is it's a geological correlation technique used to date sedimentary and volcanic sequences. It's what they use to date rock and the sediment, and it's really cool. And he's an extremely well-versed writer and author, and I like his stuff. He's written a couple other books here. What was it called? Bringing Fossils to Life, Evolution, What the Fossils Are Made Of, The Story of the Life of the Fossils, and 25 different fossils. One of those guys that's on the forefront of geology and paleontology and speculative biology and stuff. And his book, it's good. It's a small reader, honestly. I bet someone who's got a college degree would read it about in a month compared to me and my, forever. But it's a good book. It talks about a lot of other publishings that you should read too. And I'll go into detail and list them here on the end of the podcast, just for more acknowledgement and more research that you can do on your own. That's what I want to encourage the listener every time I do these. I want to encourage you. I want to light the spark of curiosity in your brain where you go and you do your own research. All right. I'm a guy, I'm working 2 jobs right now. I am burnt out when I do these things. I'm doing these at 2 a.m. recording them. It's crap. My energy is low. But you guys, enjoying all this time in quarantine, why don't you read about dinosaurs? Why don't you read about the first ever Compsognathus skeleton found and how they thought it was a fossilized rat from prehistoric times before they realized it was a dinosaur. Before they realized it was the first ever evidence of bipedalism in dinosaurs. It's a really good book. Donald says, after great reception from my first books, The Story of Life in 25 Fossils and The Story of Earth in 25 Rocks. I love the thought of that. The Story of the Earth in 25 Rocks. That's great. It really narrows it down. I thought it was about time to do a dinosaur book using the same format. This is in his preface, and he's talking about what he's doing. And he's a guy, he loves dinosaurs and fossils, and I love seeing that enthusiasm. All right? It's what I'm doing here. The difference is I don't have the paleontology experience. It's pretty much just me reading about something or an article on the internet and being like, oh, that's fascinating. Or a lot of times it's a YouTube rabbit hole, man, and I wind up finding out stuff about Herrerasaurus that I didn't even know that his claws were facing backwards before they found out. It's just stuff like that. Finding those discoveries for yourself. This book, each chapter focuses on a particular discovery or genus or specimen of scientific and historical significance, and it weaves a story around it of the interesting and amazing people who found them and what they thought. and a summary of what we now know about this dinosaur. Paleontology is replete with colorful characters and great human interest stories, with the eccentric William Buckland to the nasty feud between Gideon Mantell and Richard Owen, and to even the Bone Wars between Edward Drinker Cope and Orthaniel Charles Marsh. That's the artistrophy. That's the history of these paleontologists. They have been arguing about dinosaurs for decades, hundreds of years, centuries. I mean, the dinosaur taxonomy wasn't even identified until like 1870. I mean, no, 1859 was when they finally classified dinosaurs and said that there's a whole realm of extinct creatures that we didn't know about. It took them that long to finally finish debating and arguing.
But that's the scenario. You're sleeping. It's 11 p.m. You're getting to bed. You're doing good. Yet you hear
Theremin?
Yeah, right.
I start to just hear just like coming from where? From outside
your window, and you look out, and it's a little flying saucer.
Yeah.
Green lights going. You go down. You knock on this thing. He opens it up.
Is it a green cumulon?
It's not a green cumulon, but it is a green alien.
Okay.
And he goes, "Dad, Dad, Dad, Dad!" And he puts his hands in your face.
He just keeps throwing his fingers at me.
Dad, Dad, Dad! That's what you did.
So obnoxious.
I know. So I hate to know. Hate to annoy the audience and everything.
Now, I know you're all probably wondering, why are you going to dinosaurs, Dave? Why are you going back? Well, there's no real special reason. I'm trying to identify stuff I can talk about and stuff that I can read about, that I can easily get information for, and, coherently repeat it back to you. Like, this is all research that other people have done, and I am simply restating the facts to try and just spread the word about history and paleontology. I feel like this podcast will develop into a lot of historical discovery stuff, and I love ancient alien stuff where it's just weird paranormal fantasies. And I thought about doing for an episode maybe history about some paranormal creatures, like some Loch Ness stuff, or the history of Sasquatch and how it's influenced all of our media and just
Groovy.
So I know Disney Plus has just announced that they're going to be bringing all the episodes from the 1994 Jim Henson dinosaur show sitcom to Disney Plus. I never watched that show. I was too young at the time. I was watching Land Before Time. That was where I got all my dinosaur stuff, man. There's a lot of those movies, and they were freaking awesome, man. Dude, reminiscing. I'm just flashing back in my head, renting those movies from the library. But another thing I noticed that is really cool that I may have to get a National Geographic subscription for and read about is they're doing Walking with Dinosaurs again, which 20 years ago, the old National Geographic Walking with Dinosaurs came out. I recorded that on VHS. I distinctly remember all the commercials in it because I had taped it using the VCR back when we had home videos and we could tape over videos, and it was pretty great. I could literally fast forwarding through commercials instead of skipping ads like we are now. Yeah, they're doing a new Walking with Dinosaurs because all the science has changed. And a lot of the science that they showed in that previous Walking with Dinosaurs Volume 1 was inaccurate now, based by our science now. Because that's the beautiful thing about this paleontology. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that it's changing, it's growing, we're making new discoveries every day.
Do you think this scene should have been cut? We were so worried when the boys were writing it. But now we're glad. It's better than some of the previous scenes, I think.
At least ours was better visually.
At least ours was committed. It wasn't just a string of pussy jokes.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
Alright, so let's talk about Megalosaurus and the story of the first ever dinosaur, the gaslighting of Megalosaurus, if you will, from Scrotum humanum to the great lizard that it is, the first ever named dinosaurs. Let's say for centuries, You know, you're finding these giant bones in the earth. You don't know what they are. You think they're from ancient gods. You think they're from cyclopses. You think they're from Amazonian women. You think they're giants out of the Bible. You don't know what they are. There's no proof of comparative biology. There's no science yet that has come along to describe what they are. And I mean, all you've known for the last 1700 years is religion. All you can think of is just the stories that people have passed down from eon to eon, from century to century, sorry. And it's very interesting. On the Greek island of Samos, the newest large bones were thought to be the remains of Amazon warrior women who had died in battle. We now know that they were prehistoric elephants, giraffes, antelopes, etc. that had fossilized there, and the red color of these rocks was thought to be the blood stains from the battles. The color actually comes from the rusty iron oxides in the rocks during fossilization, and they didn't know this science. You know, geology hadn't been developed. It was in its infancy at this stage. There was even striking fossils in the Gobi Desert, Mongolia, where a lot of people considered Protoceratops to be what developed the griffin myth. You know, the frills on its neck and head were considered wings. Europe, the myths around Earth found in the Bible strongly influenced what people saw in specimens, just like they do today. People use the Bible to describe anything in science that they don't understand or don't want to understand. For example, in 1726, the Swiss scholar Johann Schweizer obtained and described large fossil skeletons of a creature found in Switzerland. This was what I was talking about earlier, when Johann found the evidence of an extinct salamander and thought it was a human. His bias towards the Bible and Christianity and everything thought this was evidence of early man. See, it looks kind of funny just looking at it from the perspective of someone living in the information age from this time period, looking back that that's a scientist in the 1700s, quote unquote scientist in the 1700s, would describe a large amphibian as a human from the Bible. It just seems funny because we live in that age where we have a lot of knowledge at our fingertips. Those computers in our pockets tell us what to do. If we go back in time, if you try to think in your perspective from the 1700s, if you put on those weird-looking booty shoes with the frills from the 1720s and see what they're seeing for the first time and try to make sense of that, your perspective entirely changes, you know? There's no dinosaurs at this time. Nothing has been described as dinosaur. We don't know what they are. It could be the bones of anything. And the closest thing we thought were humans. And numerous accounts of giant bones are known in literature before the 1800s, but most cannot be tracked down or identified because the fossils have been lost and inadequate illustrations, measurements, or local information are not available to determine what they were talking about. Over the years, these stories of dinosaur bones and fossils and discoveries of them get lost to time, and it gets harder and harder to identify them and where they went the further you go back. That's why Megalosaurus may be one of the first dinosaurs named and classified, but it is not the first fossil ever found. You know, the fossils, again, found for hundreds of years, but we didn't know what they were. One of the first such fossils that might be identifiable was illustrated in Robert Plott's 1677 book, Natural History of Oxfordshire. Plott was the first professor of chemistry at the University of Oxford, and later he was curator at the Ashmolean Museum of Oxford, established in 1683. He was interested in all areas of natural history known at the time. His book described the living animals and plants of the Oxfordshire region, as well as some of the rocks and fossils. And among this was a strange piece of fossil bone that Plott correctly guessed was the end of a thigh bone of a very large creature. This description was unusual for Plott because he did not believe that fossils were the petrified remains of animals. Instead, he imagined that they were formed by the crystallization inside rocks. So, I mean, again, this is a perspective from another human. You know, we've got 7 billion of them, or how many? I haven't checked the radar on how many people are on this planet lately. But you've got billions of perspectives, billions of eyes looking at these and thinking, I don't know what that is. That could be a rock. That could be a plant. That could be a fossil. You know, like this guy, Plott, he'd been around rocks all his life and fossils and everything. And he just thought that this weird looking end of a femur was just a strange rock formation, because that's all that fossils are. Through fossilization, it's the compression of bone into mineralization of bone into rock. Like, it's fascinating, the chemistry behind it. And I'm not going to pretend to be one that knows how it works entirely, but again, it's do your own research segment.
What is that? Ugh, it's hideous! Oh, that's not very nice. It's just a donkey. Come on!
And the specimen was found in the quarries north of Oxford from a formation we know now was part of the Middle Jurassic-Tancian limestone, a section of limestone that is correctly identified from the Jurassic period, the middle of the Jurassic period, where during the time of the Jurassic period, theropods began evolving. They began developing in widespread numbers with many different evolutionary traits, because Jurassic period was where the Earth had extreme amounts of oxygen. That's when you started seeing sauropods developed, and large creatures were being... Giant insects were very prevalent during the Jurassic period because of the amount of oxygen and the warmth. It was a jungle planet. We were a jungle planet at that time. That bone, that femur bone, that end of that femur bone was discovered in that area and is most definitely the femur of Megalosaurus. But the bone was lost. We do not know where it went, and after all these years it's gone, but the only thing we have are illustrations from that early time period. And in Platt's book that was written before the 1700s, that's insane how long ago that was. Just time, oh man, time makes me tired. Just thinking about how long it is. Oh, God.
6 sticks spit to crew. Crack Attack is back, Jack. You have no idea who I am. No idea, friend. It's Nash Ricky. Whoa.
And again, in 1763, Richard Brooks republished Platt's illustration of this first fossil and the femur, and called the fossil Scrotum humanum. If you are someone who hasn't been around dinosaurs, because no one was before, 1800s when it was finally described, everyone had thought it was something from the Bible, thought it was some kind of evidence of giants from the Bible. And looking at this femur, positioned it at a point where it looked vaguely like a ball sack. It entirely looked like a human scrotum. And this is where the first name came from. This is where they thought it should have been named Scrotum humanum. The fossil was lost. The drawing was the only thing we had evidence of it. I kind of looked at it, and it does very much look like balls, but it's not. It's the end of a femur. It's a broken femur, because fossils aren't always intact. They're always shredded. Not all skeletons are complete skeletons when you find them. It's not as clean cut and dry as people think when it comes to paleontology. You have fragments of bones, and it's a painstaking process to put them back together. It's funny, because later on, even in the 1970s, there's a British paleontologist called Lambert Beverly Halstead who tried to reclaim that name and considered recalling Megalosaurus Scrotum humanum, saying that it's proper, it's what they found it and what they initially called it. But then again, this was the guy who was famous for trying to act out dinosaurs mating while giving presentations at scientific meetings. He was the guy that came to the science parties a little too drunk. He would act out the dinosaur mating rituals. I don't know, but I found some of his books, and now I want to buy some of his books just because they look hilarious. I'm sure all of his science is outdated by now because, again, it's always changing.
That's a really good one. That's what I was thinking too. You blew it.
Yeah.
And with fossils being so fragmented, we still don't have a complete skeleton in Megalosaurus. We still don't have. Even though there have been hundreds of bones found, there's still no complete skeleton in Megalosaurus. But even though that original fossil was lost, specimens continue to be found in the Stones Field quarry. They ended up in the Oxford collections. Most were huge but fragmentary, so it was impossible to identify the animal to which they belong. Until, here we go, 1797, a lower jawbone with several teeth in various states of eruption was found. This was Megalosaurus's lower jaw. This is when we started to see the structure of a theropod's jaw. And it's that iconic, if you look up first fossil, you will see, next to the scrotum fossil, you will see Megalosaurus's lower jaw. It's iconic. It was bought for Oxford by autonomist and physician Sir Christopher Peggy for the then pricely sum of 10 shillings and 6 pence, which, roughly comes out to be about $4 in today's money. It was placed in the anatomy collections of Christ Church College in Oxford, where Peggy taught. And by 1815, there were quite a few bones that they had excavated from that area. And they caught the attention of the legendary naturalist Sir William Buckland. Okay, let's stop the program. We're going to dive into William Buckland. Not sexually, of course. I mean, that would be gross, but I mean, you know what I mean.
They call him Fingers, but I never see him fing. Oh, there they go.
So, William Buckland, again, a pioneer in paleontology and zoology. Buckland was one of the most amazing and colorful figures in the history of science. Born in 1784 in Axminster in Devon in southwestern England, he accompanied his father, the local church rector.
He says rectum damn near killed him.
On fossil collecting walks on the coastline of the Lyme Regis, which is it's fascinating. That was the location where Manny Anning found like the first marine reptiles, like the first plesiosaurs, and identified them, which we will go into. I think is actually the same kind of time period. Once they discovered the dinosaur taxonomy, they described a lot of marine reptiles from that area. By 1813, he succeeded his mentor John Kidd as a reader in mineralogy at Oxford, and he soon became famous for his popular and engaging style of lecturing. I love this expert about Buckland. Buckland was known for his dramatic delivery and gestures during lecture, which just means he's an engaging professor. That is so good. You want to have one that it gets in your face and tells you what it is about this stuff. I had a lot of professors. I didn't do well in their classes because they drone on. I mean, that's what's happening now with our e-learning and all these kids Zoom meetings for their classes. It's hard because of this COVID, because it's like watching a YouTube video and then trying to do your homework and tests and everything. It's nuts. I can't imagine doing this for a whole year, for a whole school year.
Reverse. Gas. Music.
Stop! Come back! What is all this rock and roll racket?
According to one story from The Life and Correspondence of William Buckland, D.D. FRS, written by Gordon, 1894. That's the only description it has. It probably has that book in here somewhere, but I do want to find that because this William Buckland guy is crazy, and I like it. This is a description of a lecture from William Buckland. He paced like a Franciscan preacher, up and down behind a long showcase, up 2 steps in a room in the old auditorium. He had in his hand a huge hyena skull. He suddenly dashed down the steps, rushed skull in hand at the first undergraduate on the front bench and shouted, "What rules the world?" The youth, terrified, threw himself against the next back seat and answered not a word. He rushed then on me, pointing the hyena full in my face. "What rules the world?" And I said, "I haven't an idea, sir." "The stomach rules the world," he cried again, mounting his rostrum. "The stomach rules the world. The great ones eat the less, and the lesser eat the lesser still." He's like the rock star of the 1700s. This guy was insane. He even gave lectures on horseback, just riding in the lecture on horse. That's awesome. That's keeping these guys engaged when there was no internet, no electricity. There was nothing to nothing to do except just be crazy. His eccentricities extended into his household too, which was loaded with specimens of fossils, minerals, and animals that he had collected over the years. He and his wife, Mary Moreland, a talented naturalist and illustrator in her own right, would debate which species of fly was buzzing around the table. Like, these are the guys I want to have a dinner with. They're insane. And we'll get to that. The dinner with these guys is insane because he's a zoophage. They would have a zoophage. It was, they would try to make a meal from almost every animal they could obtain, a practice known as zoophagy. Mole and blue bottle fly were apparently the most disgusting, but his guests also recorded him eating panther, crocodile, and mouse. Another account has them eating and offering to their guests crisp mice and golden butter, panther chops, rhino pie, trunk elephant, crocodile for breakfast, sliced porpoise head, horse's tongue, kangaroo ham. According to Augustus Hare in his autobiography, The Story of My Life, from 1900, talk of strange relics led to mention of the heart of a French king, possibly Louis XIV, preserved at the Newnham in a silver casket. Dr. Buckland, whilst looking at it, exclaimed, "I have eaten many strange things, but have never eaten the heart of a king before." And before anyone could hinder him, he had gobbled it up, and the precious relic was lost forever. This guy's a freaking maniac, man. He's out there. He's on the front lines of paleontology. You know, he's keeping people entertained, and that's what you got to do. That edutainment. That's how you build the listener's base.
To be holiday cheermeister.
Holiday hoopy whatty?
Now, to continue talking about Buckland, he had been looking at the bones in the Oxford collection from the Stonesfield Slate Quarry for quite some time. I mean, I'm sure he's like studying them, but I'm also like picturing him just standing there staring at them.
This is a weird looking dinosaur. I wonder what it tasted like.
Yeah, at the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1818, the legendary autonomist and paleontologist Baron Georges Cuvier, I think that's how it's pronounced. Cuvier came to Oxford to see these remarkable huge fossils. Cuvier looked at them closely, especially the jaw with its reptilian teeth, many of which were extruding from the fossil, and decided that they were the remains of a huge lizard. Buckland and his friend William Conybeare continued to call it the huge lizard, which Conybeare rendered into Greek as Megalosaurus, and thus the name was born. Informally, they used this name in 1822 in an unpublished article intended for one of Cuvier's volumes until James Parkinson published this unofficial name in the same year, actually. It was in the same year. But luckily, this publication had no standing in the codes of zoology. There was no description or any other indications with that name. There had not been a classification of dinosaur yet. At the annual meeting of the Geological Society in London, Buckland presented a paper. This was in 1824, so this is 2 years later. At that same meeting, Conybeare described the first plesiosaur found at the Lyme Regis by Mary Anning. A few months later, Buckland's formal descriptions with illustrations of the bones done by his wife appeared in the Transactions of the Geological Society of London, given Megalosaurus official status. Buckland did not give it a species name, however, and in 1826 Ferdinand von Röntgen named it Megalosaurus conybearii. This name never caught on, and in 1827 Gideon Mantle named it Megalosaurus bucklandi, in honor of the man who described it for science. Now they changed the name, a total of 4 times in the course of 1726 to 1820. In over 100 years. It took them that long to figure out what was going on with it. I mean, even then, it took longer still if you consider all the time where dinosaurs were being discovered and thought to be giants, where bones were being discovered thought to be the balls of giants, the giant balls of giants. It's awesome. And I'm so glad that Buckland got his name on it because he is a rock star. I'm going to do more sections on dinosaurs and other paleontology that he has described in his works at some point. But right now, let's just all take a moment. Let's take a little time to slappy clap for Buckland, the man who named him.
The rock star paleontologist, Sir William Buckland.
Whoa! How y'all doing tonight, London? Yeah!
Yeah, welcome to the transactions of the Geological Society of London. Oh, 1824, baby. Yeah. Now, before we get into these opening ceremonies tonight, I want you to think deep and think hard about what I'm about to say. Thus, the great drama of universal life is perpetually sustained. And though the individual actors undergo continual change, the same parts are ever filled by another and another and another generation, renewing the face of the earth and the bosom of the deep with endless successions of life and happiness. This is London Geological Survey. Let's get into it.
When the party's breaking up and the clubs are closing down and the city of angels sleeps, there's only one place in town, me and the boys will be found. Got a Jones.
So now, Buckland tried to reconstruct what the animal looked like, but he had very little to go on. Again, this is fragments of bones. Just a jaw, part of a skull, some hind limb bones, the hip bones, and part of the spinal column. Because everyone thought it was a huge lizard, nearly all reconstructions showed it walking on four huge, stumpy legs. And analyzing the shape of the hind limbs, Buckland finally realized that they had been held in an upright vertical position. So Megalosaurus was not reconstructed as a giant, sprawling lizard, but as something that had a reptilian head and an elephantine body. The early drawings of Megalosaurus are pretty fascinating. They all are just a giant lizard, and that's what they thought at the time. Buckland followed Cuvier in suggesting that it was a 40 feet long and as heavy as a 7 foot tall elephant. And in the printed version of his lecture, influenced by the huge size of Mantel's discoveries, he described in chapter 2, which I'll talk about next week when we go into Iguanodon, Buckland upped his length estimate to 60 to 70 feet long. That is huge, alright? Tyrannosaurus was only 40. Gigantosaurus is maybe 50. And the largest theropod, Spinosaurus, has been recorded at 55 feet long. 60 to 70 feet is a long creature. And there was really no way to tell because none of the tailbones had ever been found. For many people, a huge reptile with wicked-looking teeth conflicted with their literal interpretation of the Bible. With the lion lying down by the lamb and all the animals living in a quote-unquote peaceable kingdom before Adam's fall. Dun, dun, dun. Buckland was good enough naturalist to reject this ridiculous idea that Megalosaurus was a vegetarian with those teeth. An idea revived by a lot of modern-day creationists. They claim that T-Rex used its sharp teeth to open coconuts. This dinosaur, this massive creature that weighs as much as like 15 elephants, used its sharp teeth to feed on coconuts. Good job, flat earthers. You really cracked the case. That's why T-Rex evolved banana-sized teeth so it could crack open coconuts. Genius, really. It's groundbreaking. By 1842, Richard Owen had united Megalosaurus with two other discoveries, Iguanodon and Haliosaurus, to create the taxon Dinosauria, and the public began to appreciate the diversity of huge extinct monsters. This was the first wave of dinosaur propaganda in 1842. They started describing dinosaurs. Owen recruited the sculptor Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins to make life-size models of these amazing creatures for the Great Exhibition of 1851 as part of the incredible Crystal Palace exhibits. And these are on display today in Crystal Palace Park in Sydenham, where you can view them. And I mean, it's fascinating. You look at these old sculptures of dinosaurs and you're like, holy crap. This was the first steps towards modern paleontology. And I mean, this is fascinating because I watched that Dilophosaurus documentary about the guy who's remodeling Dilophosaurus right now for the Natural History Museum in Chicago, in Vegas, and he's doing a whole new description of the dinosaur that hasn't been done before. And it's a process. It's a lengthy process. Even with COVID, getting his supplies and his materials, it's just fascinating to watch. And back then, this is, the 1800s. The construction of something like this or sculpting like this was painstakingly long. Hawkins reconstructed Megalosaurus according to Owen's directions as a huge lumbering elephantine predator, and in some illustrations they were shown preying on the large herbivore Iguanodon, which Iguanodon at that time was still the one that had the thumb spike that was considered to be on its nose. We'll get into that next week when we talk about Iguanodon's life. Even though the models were grossly inaccurate by modern standards, they were consistent with the current idea that dinosaurs resembled huge lizards on 4 limbs. And Owen viewed them as quote-unquote super reptiles. These models were among the first to raise the public consciousness of the existence of dinosaurs, and they stirred the first wave of dinomania. Can you think about that? A new discovery like that. Right now we're dealing with a lot of quantum stuff and a lot of space theories and just the whole thing about the, Galactic Federation and discoveries like that. On this scale back then, that's what the public were thinking. They'd read this in the newspaper and they're like, holy crap, what is this? Dinosaurs are real? They never talked about that in the Bible. It makes people question. And once you start questioning, then you start searching for answers. That curiosity, that spark I'm talking about. Do your own research.
Hey, I got First Amendment rights.
We just amended them.
And so Donald talks about there were hundreds of specimens found later on after Buckland had first described them, and they weren't always megalosaurs. They were always other theropods. I mean, some of them were Megalosaurus, but there were still not enough fragments found to build a complete skeleton, a complete reconstruction of this dinosaur. It was such a archetypal theropod too, because it was the first dinosaur found. It developed into a taxonomic nightmare. When you're naming and classifying a fossil, you're supposed to find its genus and its phylum and everything and put it on the tree and figure out where it was placed in evolution and in the timeline. Many of these theropods found in that area were from the same period during the Jurassic period, so they were all being classified under Megalosaur bucklandi, which is kind of a nightmare. Today, most paleontologists reject these additional fragmentary fossils as true specimens of Megalosaurus bucklandi, but these mistakes are still common in dinosaur literature. There's a lot of misidentification of dinosaur bones out there, and it's troubling, but it's unavoidable. When we have no real evidence other than their fossils, it's hard to describe. You find one, you don't know if it's a bone of anything. It's such a mystery, and I love that mystery. So what was Megalosaurus really like? The original material had almost no front limbs or tail, or most of the spine, and only fragments of the skull. So it's very hard to reconstruct. It's hard to get a picture when you only have 4 pieces of a puzzle. You're trying to do a puzzle and imagine all the pieces are missing, and you have to go find the pieces first before you can complete the puzzle. That makes it really difficult, especially when you don't have a cover of a box to go with you. Your picture is gone. You have no idea what these are. No frame of reference from 65 million years ago. But in 1859, the tiny theropod dinosaur Compsognathus from the Sulfan limestone was described, and the first clearly bipedal dinosaur was entered into scientific literature. This dinosaur was so small that few thought to compare it to Megalosaurus, but again, this is a new discovery in 1859, over 100 years after the first femur was found from Megalosaur. It's fascinating that it took them that long to realize that, this is a dinosaur that walked on 2 legs. What if all of them did that? What if these were related to each other somehow in the giant genus and phylum of Dinosauria? In 1870, workers in the Summertown brick pit just north of Oxford found a nearly complete skeleton of another large theropod. It was discovered in the Oxford clay, Middle Jurassic beds, just slightly older than the limestone that produced Megalosaurus. Due to its strong resemblance to buckland species, it was initially assigned to the genome, genus, like I was talking before, where they just said it was a skeleton of Megalosaurus bucklandi, but it eventually was named Eustriptospondylus. All right, that is a fun dinosaur name, but it's a long one. Eustriptospondylus. This skeleton was complete enough to give paleontologists a sense of the proper proportions and posture of Megalosaurus. We've finally got an idea of what a theropod looked like from Eustriptus spondylus. John Phillips, the scientist who first described Eustriptus spondylus, soon rearranged the Oxford Megalosaurus fossils in the proper bipedal pose, held in position in the display by cardboard sheets. And in the 1870s, the discovery of complete skeletons of Allosaurus in Northern America further confirmed the bipedal posture and limb configurations of small theropod dinosaurs. And you can today, most of Buckland's original fossils are on display at the Oxford Museum of Natural History. Pretty fascinating stuff. And I mean, that's the compound science behind dinosaurs, the comparative biology, where you're comparing these species around the same period of time, and you're like, they must have evolved in the same technique to survive. Competition. When Pangea was all together in one continent, you had these dinosaurs living near each other. The closest relatives of Megalosaurus include several other megalosaurids in Europe. Eustriptus spondylus is one. Wyvenator from Germany. Wyvenator, I've never actually heard about that one. I might do some research on that. And another fragmentary genus known as Duvionator, from the much older Middle Jurassic rocks in Dorset, England. The closest relative Megalosaurid was the almost T-Rex-sized Megalosaur Tovosaurus from the late Jurassic. And from the Morrison Formation of Colorado. More distant relatives included the Afroventori, found mostly in the Jurassic of Europe and Asia, and Afrovenator itself, which is from Africa, as the name it suggests. All these megalosaurids are in the same, it's the same genus. The Megalosaurus apparently underwent a significant evolutionary radiation in the Middle Jurassic, and like I was talking before, that's what happened because of the environment. They were able to produce these extreme variations due to the large amount of oxygen in the air, the large amount of competition from all these other theropods and other genuses and phylums, and even their prey developing different weapons, and their prey developing in size. They had to find new ways to succeed. Like Buckland said, the stomach rules the world. Megalosaurus, the first dinosaur to be named and discovered, opened the door to the real quote-unquote Jurassic world of giant reptiles who ruled the planet. But Megalosaurus itself was always incomplete, was badly misinterpreted and reconstructed, and almost saddled with the name Scrotum humanum. The gaslighting of Megalosaurus. It's fascinating. And again, this was just an excerpt from The Story of Dinosaurs by Donald R. Prothero. I love this book. It's great. It's given me a lot of stuff to research and read about. There's some other stories here. Dinosaur Hunters, True Story of Scientific Rivalry by Deborah Cadbury. Men and Dinosaurs, Edwin Colbert, Brenda Maddox, Adrian Mayer. These are all authors that you can find in this book that provide information from these stories and information on how these dinosaurs were developed and, in general, classified. It's a whole range of science that during the 1700s, the 1800s, was being built. We had no framework for it, and that's fascinating to me. Megalosaurus, it was a tragic beginning. The femur was considered to be a scrotum, and we almost had a dinosaur being named. Well, it wasn't even a dinosaur, it just would have been a genus of giants. Like, imagine if all the fossils we found today were arranged in the shape of giants. Different species of people from the Bible in the early days. Picturing like let's say Cain and Abel, but they had like claws and fangs like a raptor. it's again, religion interfering with science, science deviating from religion. We're having stuff like this right now. I was scrolling through the internet and I saw an article that talked about woman uses religion to deny herself COVID vaccine. Like she said something about my Catholic body is a temple and I will not get a vaccine. It's one of those anti-vaxxer people that thinks there's like microchips and I don't know what they think. It's extreme conspiracy paranoidism. I don't know. I'm not the person that described the salamander as a human.
Our administration believes that there are loopholes that could allow the cloning of human beings if the technology were developed. Therefore, today I am issuing a directive that bans the use of any federal funds for any cloning of human beings.
Anywho, you guys are awesome. I just want to say thanks so much for listening. This has been a great, fun episode. I really like this one because it's full of information. It's not like our other ones where we're just blurbing out the news and stuff. I got really excited reading about this, and it just takes me back to my days as a dinosaur, dinosaur researcher. You guys are the best. This has been another episode of Soccermom. And you know what? I don't know if I've ever told you guys why I named it Soccermom. The origin. It's just a gamer tag, and I originally thought I was going to do like Twitch streaming or something and do video game stuff. Maybe I'll talk video games. But, right now I bought a copy of that Cyberpunk 2077. I played a little bit of it, and holy crap, I'm bored, so I'm going to go back to the podcast stuff. It's good. It's good when there's bad games released because then I actually am more productive. Again, everyone, I hope you have a great Christmas. This is Christmas week, Christmas of 2020, the virtual Christmas year, This week I'll probably do a little bit of recording from our little party. We were going to have some kind of Zoom meeting, and I was going to try and figure out how to record quotes and jokes from it and just have a little party. And I'll probably use that in the next episode, but I do want to continue this story, this series. The next chapter talks about Iguanodon and misinterpretation of its skeleton, and we all know the famous thumb spike on the nose and how, again, we're dumb. People are dumb, and we didn't know. We didn't know what a dinosaur looked like.